for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your host today. The U.S. has paused delivery of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel because Israel wants to use them on Rafah, and the U.S. is saying, not so fast. So we'll talk about that. We have a lot of Trump news to get to, especially involving his hush money trial. His hash money trial. That'd be funny. Well, maybe that's what Trump's smoking. Who knows? Nikki Haley, who left the presidential race in March, just got 20% of the vote in Indiana this past week. We will talk about that and what that means for Trump when it comes to November. Plus, we've got some more election news to talk about. Right now, let's go ahead and start the show by reminding you that you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can follow the show on Facebook at facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on X at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, X, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. Be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica affiliate. As a matter of fact, we're recording the show on Thursday, May 9th, 2024. Some Pacifica affiliates are doing their spring pledge drives. If you are doing a pledge drive, please donate to your local Pacifica affiliate, even if they're not doing a pledge drive. Pacifica does great work, and they have a lot of great shows on the network, including Tom Hartman's show, Ralph Nader, so many good shows, and I know I'm forgetting a whole bunch of them. Bradcast. Like I said, Pacifica does great work. Please donate to your local Pacifica affiliate. They could always use the money. Let's get to our first story here. This is Tara Kopp writing for the Associated Press. This is dated May 8th out of Washington. As it targets Hamas's underground tunnels in Gaza, Israel has relied on powerful 2,000-pound bombs provided by the United States. But now those deliveries are on hold. The U.S. is pausing a shipment of 1,800 of the bombs as well as 1,700 500-pound bombs, according to U.S. officials. The decision comes as Israel is planning an assault on the southern Gaza city of Rafah in an attempt to root out the final elements of Hamas. With more than 1 million refugees sheltering in Rafah, U.S. officials are concerned the bombs could inflict massive casualties. Human rights groups have long said that Israel's use of powerful bombs has caused the indiscriminate killing of civilians. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told the Senate panel Wednesday that smaller, more precise weapons are needed for a densely populated area like Rafah. Still, he made clear that the decision wasn't final. He said, quote, "We're going to continue to do what's necessary to ensure that Israel has the means to defend itself. But that said, we are currently reviewing some near-term security assistance shipments in the context of unfolding events in Rafah," end of quote. So here's what 2,000-pound bombs are. While the U.S. has dropped 2,000-pound bombs off its aircraft since World War II, current versions date back to the Vietnam War. It's an airdropped munition, one that can carry a higher payload because it doesn't have an engine. It's one of the larger munitions in the U.S. inventory. That is according to Ryan Brobst, senior research analyst at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy Center on Military and Political Power. The 2,000-pound bomb has multiple variants. Some are designed to penetrate deep underground targets. Others detonate above ground and cause widespread damage. Depending on the variant and whether the munition is dropped in an open or urban area, its blast radius can be as far as a quarter-mile away or a much more confined area. The bombs are dumb or unguided bombs but can be turned into more precise weapons with the addition of Joint Direct Attack Munition Kits, or JDAM kits, which add a tail fin and navigation. That added kit enables troops to guide the munition to a target rather than simply dropping it from a fighter jet onto the ground. The kits make the weapons more precise, but in a densely populated urban environment, a JDAM kit is not going to make much of a difference. A precise hit will still have the reach to kill unintended bystanders. U.S. fighter jets, bombers, and drones can all fire the JDAMs, and the U.S. began providing the munitions to Ukraine in 2022, a slightly modified version that could be launched from Ukrainian aircraft. After the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas, the U.S. provided 2,000-pound munitions to Israel to assist in its defense. And unlike other types of munitions in the U.S. inventory, the military has an ample supply of them. So providing them doesn't involve the same type of stockpile pressures the U.S. has with other more limited munitions like the 155mm artillery rounds. The Israeli military has said little about what kinds of bombs and artillery it is using in Gaza, but from blast fragments found on site and analyses of strike footage, experts are confident that the vast majority of bombs dropped on the besieged enclave are U.S.-made. They say the 2,000-pound bombs have killed hundreds in densely populated areas. Brooks said the 2,000-pound bombs are still needed to assist Israel in striking Hamas's tunnel network in Rafah. Wes Bryant, a weapons expert and retired American Air Force Master Sergeant who served on an independent task force for the state and defense departments on Israel's use of weapons in Gaza, said that the pause would be a huge hit to the Israeli arsenal. The 2,000-pound and 500-pound bombs are some of the main munitions used by Israel in its 7-month war campaign. Bryan said, quote, "They've been burning right through them," end of quote. He said the munitions are made by major American weapons manufacturers like Raytheon, Northrop, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and General Atomics. A report compiled by the Independent Task Force for the State and Defense Departments last month said U.S. sources informed one of its members that 300,000 munitions have been dropped down or fired in Gaza during the first 6 months of the war. It cited credible media investigations that in the first month of the Israeli campaign alone, there were at least 500 craters in Gaza consistent with the use of 2,000-pound bombs. The potential use of those bombs in Rafah, where more than 1 million people have sheltered because they have nowhere else to go, has drawn significant administration concern. At the hearing, Austin questioned whether the 2,000-pound bomb was the right tool for the Rafah operation. He said, quote, "It's about having the right kinds of weapons for the task at hand, and a small diameter bomb, which is a precise weapon that's very useful in a dense buildup environment, but maybe not so much a 2,000-pound bomb that could create a lot of collateral damage," end of quote. He said the U.S. wants to see Israel do more precise operations. Israel reacted strongly to the U.S. decision. Its UN ambassador, Gilad Erdan, called the pause a very disappointing decision, quote, "even frustrating," end of quote, in an interview with Israeli Channel 12 News. He suggested that the move stemmed from political pressure on Biden from Congress, campus protests, and the upcoming election. And that's probably a bit of it. Although the Republicans in Congress want the bombs to continue to be sent to Israel. I think that the campus protests are what's really getting on it. And for that matter, the upcoming election, because there are polls that are showing that people of Islamic descent that usually vote for Democrats have said they're not going to vote for Biden because of this war. And Biden's seeing these polls and he's wondering what he's going to have to do to fix it. So now's the time to tell Israel, no, we're not going to let you use 2,000-pound bombs on heavily populated areas. And that's only smart, right? I wish they would have done this a while ago. Better yet, the U.S. shouldn't have even gotten involved in it. Yes, I know that we provide a lot of aid to Israel. But should we? They're their own country. They should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. We shouldn't be nursemaiding them around for the last 70-something years. Really, we shouldn't. That's just my opinion. And I tell you what, the campus protests are continuing. Good on those students. The students are always right when it comes to protest. I got news for you. They were right about Vietnam. They were right about civil rights. They're right about this one. And if you think they're wrong, history's going to prove you wrong. Just got news for you. All right, let's get to our next story here. We're going to get to a lot of Trump news. This is Lindsay Whitehurst and Michelle L. Price writing for the Associated Press. This is dated May 7th out of New York. Porn actress Stormy Daniels took the witness stand Tuesday in the hush money case against Donald Trump, who looked on as she detailed their alleged sexual encounter and the payment she got to keep it quiet. Prosecutors allege that Trump paid Daniels to keep quiet about the claims as he ran for president in 2016. Her testimony aired them very publicly as the presumptive Republican presidential nominee seeks to win the White House again. Trump denies having sex with Daniels, and his lawyers unsuccessfully pushed for a mistrial midway through her testimony. It's the biggest spectacle yet in the first criminal trial of a former American president, which is now in the third week of testimony in Manhattan. So here are some takeaways of that. The AP first asked, who is Stormy Daniels? Well, we all know who Stormy Daniels is. Her real name is Stephanie Clifford. So this is the case here. It centers on a $130,000 payment to Daniels from Trump's then lawyer Michael Cohen in the final weeks of Trump's 2016 campaign. Prosecutors say it was part of a scheme to illegally influence the campaign by burying negative stories about him. His lawyers have sought to show that Trump was trying to protect his reputation and family, not his campaign, by shielding them from embarrassing stories about his personal life. Really? No, Trump doesn't care about his own reputation. He cares about his business. That's all he cares about. Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford, told jurors that she started exotic dancing in high school and appeared in adult films at the age of 23, eventually moving on to direct more than 150 films and winning a roster of porn industry awards. Daniels testified she first met and chatted with Trump at a 2006 Lake Tahoe celebrity golfing, where her studio was a sponsor. He referred to her as the smart one and asked her if she wanted to go to dinner, she said. Daniels testified that she accepted Trump's invitation because she wanted to avoid dinner with her co-workers and thought it might help her career. Trump had his bodyguard get her number, she said. When they met up later in his penthouse, she appreciated that he seemed interested in the business aspects of the industry rather than the sexy stuff. He also suggested putting her on his TV show The Apprentice, a possibility she hoped could help establish her as a writer and director. She left to use the bathroom and was startled to find Trump in his underwear when she returned. She didn't feel physically or verbally threatened, but realized that he was bigger and blocking the way, she testified. Daniels recalled, quote, "The next thing I know was I was on the bed and they were having sex." End of quote. The encounter was brief but left her shaking, she said. Quote, "I just wanted to leave." End of quote. Daniels was asked if Trump ever told her to keep things between them confidential, and she said, quote, "Absolutely not." End of quote. She said she learned in 2011 that a magazine had learned the story of their encounter, and she agreed to do an interview for $15,000 to make money and control the narrative. The story never ran. In 2016, when Trump was running for president, Daniels said she authorized her manager to shop the story around, but did not initially receive interest from news outlets. She said that changed in October with the release of the Access Hollywood tape, in which Trump bragged about grabbing women sexually without asking permission. She said she learned that Cohen wanted to buy her silence. Midway through her testimony, Trump's lawyers moved for a mistrial. Defense lawyer Todd Blanche argued that Daniels' testimony about the alleged encounter and other meetings with him had, quote, "nothing to do with this case," end of quote, and would unfairly prejudice the jury. The judge rejected it, and he faulted defense attorneys for not raising more of their objections while she was testifying. Before Daniels took the stand, Trump's lawyers had tried to stop her from testifying about the encounter's details, saying it was irrelevant in a case about books and records. Prosecutors countered that Daniels' testimony gets at what Trump was trying to hide, and they were very mindful not to draw too much graphic detail. Before Daniels took the stand, they told the judge the testimony would be really basic and would not, quote, involve any details of genitalia, end of quote. While the judge didn't side with Trump's lawyers, he acknowledged that some details were excessive. The objections could potentially be used by Trump's lawyers if he is convicted and they file an appeal. Trump's lawyers tried to attack Daniels' credibility, suggesting she was motivated by money and that her account has shifted over the years. Defense lawyer Susan Necheles asked Daniels at one point, quote, "Am I correct that you hate President Trump?" End of quote. Daniels acknowledged she did. The lawyer asked, quote, "And you want him to go to jail?" End of quote. Daniels said, quote, "I want him to be held accountable." End of quote. Pressed again on whether that meant going to jail, she said, quote, "If he's convicted." End of quote. The defense pressed Daniels on the fact that she owes Trump hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees stemming from an unsuccessful defamation lawsuit, and on a 2022 tweet in which she said she will go to jail before I pay a penny. Daniels dug in at times in the face of pointed questions, forcefully denying the idea that she tried to extort Trump. Trump whispered frequently to his attorney during Daniels' testimony, and his expression seemed to be pained at one point as she recounted details about the dinner she says they shared. He shook his head and appeared to say something under his breath as Daniels testified that Trump told her he didn't sleep in the same room as his wife. At one point, the judge told defense lawyers during a sidebar conversation out of earshot of the jury and the public that he could hear Trump cursing audibly and see him shaking his head, according to a transcript of the proceedings. Judge Juan Merchant told Blanche, Trump's lawyer, quote, "I am speaking to you here at the bench because I don't want to embarrass him," end of quote. Blanche assured the judge he would talk to his client. The judge said, quote, "You need to speak to him. I won't tolerate that," end of quote. Yeah, because if Trump continues to do that, that's considered a contempt on his gag order. He could be found in contempt of violating his gag order because that's considered jury interference, and the judge ain't going to put up with that. I love it. On the way out of the courthouse, Trump called it a, quote, "very revealing day," end of quote. He didn't address Daniels' testimony explicitly, but claimed the prosecutor's case was, quote, "totally falling apart," end of quote. Trump's appearance in court Tuesday, like all other days he's stuck in the courtroom, means he can't be out on the campaign trail as he runs for president a third time. It's a frequent source of his complaints, but Daniels' testimony in particular might underscore how much of a distraction the trial is from the business of running for president. While Trump was stuck in a Manhattan courthouse away from voters and unable to speak for much of the day, his rival, Democratic President Joe Biden, was attending a Holocaust remembrance ceremony and condemning anti-Semitism. It's an issue Trump has sought to use against Biden in the campaign by seizing on the protests at college campuses over the Israel-Hamas war. Let me just add that if Trump gets back in office, you can guarantee that any future protest will be broken up by the military and the National Guard. I guarantee that Trump will do it. Trump doesn't care about the First Amendment except for himself. He doesn't care about it for anybody else. He just cares about himself. You people that still support Trump, you need to figure it out. You need to get a clue. Here's a quarter. Go buy a clue. Unbelievable. And speaking of the gag order violations, let's go with this one. This is Michael R. Sizak, Jennifer Peltz, Eric Tucker, and Jake Offenhartz writing for the Associated Press. This is dated May 6th out of New York. The judge in Donald Trump's hush money trial fined him $1,000 on Monday, and in his sternest warning yet, told Trump that future gag order violations could send him to jail. The AP refers to Trump as former president. We don't do that on this show. The reprimand opened a revelatory day of testimony as jurors for the first time heard the details of the financial transactions at the center of the case and saw payment checks bearing Trump's signature. The testimony from former Trump Organization controller Jeffrey McConney provided a mechanical but vital recitation of how the company reimbursed payments that were allegedly meant to suppress embarrassing stories from surfacing during Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, and then logged them as legal expenses in a manner that Manhattan prosecutors say broke the law. McConaughey's appearance on the witness stand came as the first criminal trial of a former U.S. president entered its third week of testimony. His account lacked the human drama offered Friday by longtime Trump aide Hope Hicks, but it nonetheless yielded an important building block for prosecutors trying to pull back the curtain on what they say was a corporate records cover-up of transactions designed to protect Trump's presidential bid during a pivotal stretch of the race. At the center of the testimony was a $130,000 payment Trump's then lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen made to porn actor Stormy Daniels in October 2016 to stifle her claims of an extramarital sexual encounter with Trump a decade earlier. The 34 felony counts of falsifying business records accused Trump of labeling the money paid to Cohen and his company's records as legal fees. Prosecutors contend that by paying him income and giving him extra to account for taxes and monthly installments for the year, the Trump executives were able to conceal the reimbursement. McConaughey and another witness testified that all but two of the monthly checks were drawn from Trump's personal account. Yet even as jurors saw the checks and other documentary evidence, prosecutors did not elicit testimony Monday showing that Trump himself dictated that the payments would be logged as legal expenses, a designation the prosecutors contend was intentionally deceptive. McConaughey acknowledged during cross-examination that Trump never asked him to log the reimbursements as legal expenses and never discussed the matter with him at all. Another witness, Deborah Tarasoff, a Trump Organization accounts payable supervisor, said under questioning that she did not get permission to cut the checks in question from Trump himself. Trump attorney Todd Blanche asked, quote, "You never had any reason to believe that President Trump was hiding anything or anything like that," end of quote. Tarasoff replied, "Correct," end of quote. The testimony followed Judge Juan M. Merchan's sober warning to Trump that additional violations of a gag order barring inflammatory out-of-court comments about witnesses, jurors, and others closely connected to the case could land the former president behind bars. The $1,000 fine imposed Monday marks the second time since the trial began last month that Trump has been sanctioned for violating the gag order. He was fined $9,000 last week, $1,000 for each of his 9 violations. Before jurors were brought into the courtroom, Merchant said, quote, "It appears that the $1,000 fines are not serving as a deterrent. Therefore, going forward, this court will have to consider a jail sanction," end of quote. The judge added that Trump's statements, quote, "threaten to interfere with the fair administration of justice and constitute a direct attack on the rule of law. I cannot allow that to continue," end of quote. Trump sat forward in his seat, gloring at the judge as he handed down the ruling. When the judge finished speaking, Trump shook his head twice and crossed his arms. Yet even as Merchant warned of jail time in his most pointed and direct admonition, he also made clear his reservations about a step that he described as a last resort and said he would only do so if prosecutors recommended it. Merchant said, quote, "The last thing I want to do is to put you in jail. You are the former president of the United States and possibly the next president as well. There are many reasons why incarceration is truly a last resort for me. To take that step would be disruptive to these proceedings, which I imagine you want to end as quickly as possible," end of quote. The latest violation stems from an April 22nd interview with television channel Real America's Voice in which Trump criticized the speed at which the jury was picked and claimed without evidence that it was stacked with Democrats. Once testimony resumed, McConaughey recounted conversations with longtime Trump Organization finance chief Alan Weisselberg in January 2017 about reimbursing Cohen for a $130,000 payment intended to buy Daniels' silence over her account of a sexual encounter at a 2006 celebrity golf outing in Lake Tahoe, California. McConaughey testified that Weisselberg, quote, "said we had to get some money to Michael. We had to reimburse Michael. He tossed a pad toward me and I started taking notes on what he said. That's how I found out about it," end of quote. McConaughey, who worked for Trump's company for about 36 years, retiring last year as he was granted immunity to testify for the prosecution at the Trump Organization's New York criminal tax fraud trial, said, quote, "He kind of threw the pad at me and said, 'Take this down,' end of quote. A bank statement displayed in court showed Cohen paying $130,000 to Keith Davidson, Daniels' lawyer, on October 27, 2016, out of an account for an entity Cohen created for the purpose. Weisselberg's handwritten notes spell out a plan to pay Cohen $420,000, which included a base reimbursement that was then doubled to reflect anticipated taxes, as well as a $60,000 bonus and an expense that prosecutors have described as a technology contract. McConney's own notes taken on the notepad he said Weisselberg threw at him were also shown in court. After calculations that laid out that Cohen would get $35,000 a month for 12 months, McConney wrote, quote, wire monthly from DJT. Asked what that meant, McConney said, quote, that was out of the president's personal bank account, end of quote. McConney testified that he had instructed TerraSoft to record the reimbursements to Cohen as a legal expense, reasoning that, quote, we were paying a lawyer, so I said to post it as legal expenses in the general ledger, end of quote. McConney suggested it was his idea alone to log the payments that way, acknowledging under cross-examination that Trump never directed him to log Cohen's payments as legal expenses, nor did Weisselberg relay to him that Trump wanted them logged that way. McConney testified, quote, Allen never told me that, end of quote. In fact, McConney said he never spoke to Trump about the reimbursement issue at all. Regardless, Trump lawyer Emil Bove suggested the legal expense label made sense and was not duplicitous because Cohen was a lawyer at the time. McConney responded, quote, okay, sure, yes, end of quote. That prompted laughter throughout the courtroom. After paying the first two checks to Cohen through a trust, the remainder of the checks beginning in April 2017 were paid from Trump's personal account, McConney testified. With Trump the only signatory to that account, now in the White House, the change in funding source necessitated a whole new process for us, according to McConney. TerraSoft, the other witness who testified Monday, said that once Trump became president, checks written from his personal account had to first be delivered via FedEx, quote, to the White House for him to sign, end of quote. The checks would then return with Trump's Sharpie signature. She said, quote, I'd pull them apart, mail out the check, and file the backup, end of quote, meaning putting the invoice into the Trump Organization's filing system. Prosecutors are continuing to build toward their star witness, Cohen, who pleaded guilty to federal charges related to the hush money payments, went to prison, and has been disbarred. He is expected to undergo a bruising cross-examination from defense lawyers seeking to undermine his credibility with jurors. So there's the latest on the hush money trial. So Trump could go to jail if he continues to violate the gag order, which I hope he does. It would be beautiful to see that orange jerk in jail. And I don't mean jerk. You know the word that I mean. One of Carlin's 7 dirty words that you can't say on the radio. All right, let's get to our next story. This is Bill Barrow and Lisa Mascaro writing for the Associated Press. This is dated May 5th out of Atlanta. Speaking of Trump, Trump was on the campaign trail. He told Republican donors at his Florida resort over the weekend that President Joe Biden is running a Gestapo administration, the latest example of Trump employing the language of Nazi Germany in his campaign rhetoric. And why wouldn't he? He's been reading Mein Kampf. That's where he's getting all of his ideas. The remarks Saturday at Mar-A-Lago were described by people who attended the event and spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the private session. The Gestapo comment, one person said, came as Trump renewed his complaint that Biden's White House is behind the multiple criminal prosecutions of the presumptive GOP nominee, including his ongoing hush money and fraud trial in New York and additional cases stemming from his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The Gestapo was the secret police force of the Third Reich that squelched political opposition generally and specifically targeted Jewish people for arrest during the Holocaust. Trump's unfounded comparison to Nazi-era tactics comes as he denies and tries to deflect from the charges against him, most notably his effort to overturn Biden's 2020 election before a mob of Trump supporters attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Let me add, they were traitorous Trump supporters because they are traitors. Evil, violent, conservative traitors. Republican Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota appeared Sunday on CNN's State of the Union and essentially confirmed Trump's statement, but tried to diminish its importance. Burgum, who is among the contenders to be Trump's running mate, said, quote, "This was a short comment deep into the thing that wasn't really central to what he was talking about," end of quote. Really? Yeah, no, it's a big deal when you compare the Biden administration to the Gestapo. And really, that's just absolutely ignorant to even do so. Burgum affirmed that Trump drew the parallel as part of his accusation that Biden's White House is behind his legal troubles. Burgum said, quote, "A majority of Americans feel like the trial that he's in right now is politically motivated," end of quote. Though a majority of Republicans feel this way, a majority of Americans don't. Because smart people like me and my listeners know that Trump is getting his just desserts for his crimes. Alleged crimes, I guess I would say. Well, crimes, whatever. The New York Times first reported Trump's comments after obtaining an audio recording of the Mar-A-Lago event. Trump told GOP donors, quote, "These people are running a Gestapo administration. It's the only way they're going to win," end of quote. Really? Yeah, Trump ought to know about Gestapo administration because that's what he's going to do if he gets reelected. Biden's reelection campaign blasted the reference. James Singer, spokesman for the Democrats' campaign, said in a statement, quote, "Trump is once again making despicable and insulting comments about the Holocaust while in the same breath attacking law enforcement, celebrating political violence, and threatening our democracy," end of quote. Trump's campaign did not immediately respond to an Associated Press request for comment. The AP has not obtained audio of Trump's speech at the fundraiser. Previously, in the 2024 campaign, Trump has called political opponents vermin and said migrants who cross the U.S.-Mexico border are, quote, "poisoning the blood of our country," end of quote. Rhetoric that echoes Adolf Hitler's statements during his authoritarian rule of Germany. In a December interview on conservative talk radio, Trump said, quote, "I know nothing about Hitler." Yeah. "I have no idea what Hitler said other than what I've seen on the news, and that's a very entirely different thing than what I'm saying," end of quote. Bullshit! Liar! A second person who was at Mar-a-Lago this weekend described to the Associated Press a stem-winding luncheon appearance in which Trump mixed his grievances with optimistic GOP cheerleading. Speaking for at least 90 minutes, Trump promised the gloves are coming off against Biden, the second Republican recalled. At another point, Trump called up several GOP congressional figures to the stage and referred to the many Republicans vying to be his vice presidential pick. According to one attendee, Trump said, quote, "They're lining up and begging," end of quote. They're begging, all right. Yeah, they're begging to kiss the ring or some other orifice of Trump's. Several presumed contenders circulated in the crowd and were given strategic speaking roles or lead panel discussions. Among the standouts, the Republicans said, were Republican Senators Tim Scott of South Carolina, Marco Rubio of Florida, and J.D. Vance of Ohio. The person said that Trump singled out Rubio for special praise and referenced a Florida problem, referring to a constitutional requirement that the president and vice president not claim the same state as their residences. Oh, I didn't know that was part of a constitutional requirement. I did not know that. Well, you learn something new every day. Rubio and Scott both demurred when asked about their prospects on the Sunday talk shows. On Fox Propaganda Channel Sunday, Rubio sidestepped a question about whether he would be willing to move to another state to join the Republican ticket. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, was in attendance as well, shoring up support from Trump. Johnson coordinated one of the legal challenges against the 2020 election that Trump lost, but the speaker now faces the threat of his own ouster by far-right Republicans led by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Well, he passed that one because the Democrats helped him out yesterday. So Mike Johnson is in the clear. He's going to remain. Actually, it's funny, when Marjorie Taylor Greene started reading on the floor, her colleagues started booing at her. It was great. Oh, she had a look of disgust on her face. I wish she'd have that all the time. I hate her. I really do. Marjorie Trader Green is a good description of her. With his time on stage, Johnson said the U.S. needs a strong man in the White House, one person told the AP. No, we don't need a strong man. We absolutely don't. We don't want Hitler. We don't want Mussolini. We don't want Hirohito. We don't want Kim Jong-un. We don't want Putin. We don't want Xi. We really don't. I'll even go a step further. We don't want Castro, Alexander the Great, or any of the other despots that have been in through history. We really don't, folks. Johnson, who often talks about the need to return to the national security principle of peace through strength, explained the necessity of having a strong, resolute president at a time of conflict around the world. That's according to a person familiar with the speaker's remarks. This person was not authorized to publicly discuss Johnson's comments and spoke on the condition of anonymity. The Republican National Committee said after the event that joint fundraising efforts by the RNC and the campaign for April topped $76 million, by far the best monthly effort of this campaign cycle and a step toward closing Biden's financial advantage. RNC Chairman Michael Whatley hailed an uptick in small-dollar donors, but the Mar-A-Lago event clearly focused on the party's deepest pockets. At one point, one attendee said Trump offered an open microphone to anyone who immediately pledged a $1 million contribution to the party. 2 people eventually agreed, the source said, and which is why we need campaign finance reform in this country, because the rich are buying up the politics of this country. Lock, stock, and barrel. They already got everything else. They've already got all the businesses. They got all the important land. And now they're buying up Congress, your state houses, just like Carlin said. Do I really need to play Carlin on this one? Maybe I do. I don't know. Oh. Yeah, you know what? We haven't had that in a while. I'll wait till the end of the story, and then we'll get to that. Additionally, the Times reported that Trump told his audience the Democrats effectively purchased votes through economic safety net programs while repeating false claims that U.S. elections are riddled with systemic fraud. According to the Times, Trump said, quote, "When you are a Democrat, you start off essentially at 40% because you have civil service, you have the unions, and you have welfare. And don't underestimate welfare. They get welfare to vote, and then they cheat on top of that. They cheat." End of quote. Yeah, the cheater ought to know. Look in the mirror there, orangey bastard. Oh, look in the mirror if you want to see a cheat and a liar and a thief and a criminal. That's what Donald Trump is. He's a criminal. Biden's victory was affirmed by multiple recounts across many battleground states, and Trump's assertions of fraud were rejected by multiple state and federal courts, including by judges he nominated to the bench. Trump's efforts to overturn the election and his role in his supporters' traitorous riot, let me add, on January 6th, are the subject of 2 additional indictments. Trump is not the first Republican presidential candidate to privately connect social programs with Democrats' electoral fortunes. In 2012, then-Republican nominee Mitt Romney was captured on tape at a fundraising event declaring that Democrat Barack Obama had a built-in advantage because of people he said did not have to pay federal income taxes. Romney said, quote, "There are 47% of the people who will vote for the president no matter what because they are dependent upon government, and they believe they are victims. My job is not to worry about those people. I'll never convince them that they should take personal responsibility and care for their lives." End of quote. Yeah, Mittens and his 47% remark that cost him the election. Because people are sick of Republicans. They really are. We'll get to Ottawa County in just a little bit here, which is a prime example. Final paragraph, Obama's campaign with Biden as president used those comments to bolster Democrats' arguments that Romney, a wealthy businessman, was out of touch with most Americans. Obama was reelected, and rightfully so. I love it. Oh, speaking of Trump and his election troubles, let's get to our next story here. This is Isabella Volmert, writing for the Associated Press. This is dated May 8th out of Indianapolis, Indiana. The ghost of Nikki Haley's presidential campaign is ringing up significant support in state primaries despite her withdrawal from the race in March, shortly before Donald Trump had clinched the Republican nomination. The backing for Haley, most recently in Indiana, where she grabbed more than 21% of the votes on Thursday, signals persistent discontent among party voters with Trump. He is racking up primary victories even as he has been spending much of his time recently in a New York courtroom facing state criminal charges involving hush money payments to a porn actress. Haley, the former South Carolina governor and UN ambassador who qualified for the Indiana ballot before she dropped out 2 months ago, has not endorsed Trump. A Haley campaign advisor did not immediately return a message seeking comment on the results. Indiana Democrats did not have the option of voting uncommitted in their party primary. Unease about President Joe Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war has sparked a protest vote movement in some states, raising similar questions about the strength of his support in November. Haley's support was largest in Indiana's urban and suburban counties. She won 35% of the vote in Indianapolis's Marion County and more than one-third of the vote in suburban Hamilton County. As in other states, she did best in the most Democratic areas of the state. The exception was Lake County, home to Gary, just south of Chicago. Haley won only 14% of the vote in Lake County. Biden's campaign attributed Haley's Indiana showing to Trump's trouble in suburbs and cited similar primary numbers in swing states such as Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The president has made an open appeal to Haley supporters to back him in November. The Trump campaign did not immediately respond to a request for comment. 2 weeks ago in Pennsylvania, Haley received nearly 17% of the primary vote. She earned similar support in Arizona just weeks after her exit. In an interview Tuesday with WGAL television out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Trump, who won every Indiana county, brushed off Haley's support. He said, quote, "All those people are going to come to me," end of quote. Really? I hope not. Hope they vote for Biden. Hope they do. Vote for Biden. In late January, Trump said prematurely that Haley did not have enough signatures to make it Indiana's primary ballot. While Haley did get the minimum 500 signatures needed in each congressional district to make the ballot, the margin was razor thin in the 7th district, which includes Indianapolis. Haley's campaign was largely absent from the state even while she was in the race. Indiana, with its 11 electoral votes, is far from the swing state that Pennsylvania is. Trump won Indiana by 16 percentage points in 2020. Nonetheless, Haley's support from 1 in 5 Republican voters raises questions about how they will vote in the fall. Before she dropped out, she took nearly 27% of votes in Michigan. She received 13% of the Georgia Republican vote shortly after her exit. Haley, who ended her campaign after losses to Trump across almost all Super Tuesday states in early March, recently announced she was joining the Hudson Institute, a conservative Washington think tank. In her farewell speech a day after Trump's big night, Haley declined to directly endorse him. She put the onus on Trump to win the support of the moderate Republicans and independent voters who had supported her. She said at the time, quote, "It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him, and I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people," end of quote. Oh, no, it doesn't. You got too many of them. Trump had been withering in his criticism of Haley, calling her bird brain in speeches to his supporters and questioning her decision to stay in the race. Just before Super Tuesday, Haley said she no longer felt bound by a pledge that required all Republican contenders to support the party's eventual nominee in order to participate in the primary debates. She has said little publicly, but has continued to utilize her email outreach via her Stand for America PAC, sending out updates on her Hudson appointment as well as the return of her husband, Michael, from a South Carolina Army National Guard deployment that saw him stationed in Africa during a large portion of her primary campaign. So there you go, folks. Now, before we get to other election news, yes, we haven't played it in a long time. We need to play George Carlin about that politicians don't give an F about us. They really don't. And I guess we'll just play it right now. Here we go.
There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting f***ed by a system that threw them overboard 30 years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back, so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they use to beat you over the head with all day long, when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich suckers who don't give a about them. They don't give a about you. They don't give a about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. Yeah. You know? And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
And there he is, the patron saint of Southpaws himself, George Carlin. George still has it right after all these years that he's been dead. He still has it right on the money. Correct on everything. Speaking of voters getting sick of Republicans, great news out of Holland Township, Michigan. This is Anna Skog, Katie Rosendale, and Matt Jorowski writing for Wood Television. This is dated May 7th. Voters in Holland and Park Townships have voted to recall Ottawa County Commissioner Lucy Ebel. Ebel was one of several conservative commissioners backed by the Conservative Political Action Committee Ottawa Impact. She garnered about 40% of the vote, according to unofficial results. Voters instead chose Democrat Chris Kleinjans for the 2nd District seat, which represents much of Holland Charter Township and a portion of Park Township on the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. Kleinjans won 60% of Tuesday's vote, according to unofficial results. The organizers behind the recall effort called Ebel and her Ottawa Impact counterparts too extreme. In November, petitioners submitted enough signatures to trigger the recall, 2,575, which was 94 over the minimum threshold required by law. Larry Jackson of Park Township, the treasurer for the Ottawa County Democrats, said in an October statement, quote, "The recall election will be a referendum on Ottawa Impact. The malicious actions of Lucy Ebel, Joe Moss, and the other Ottawa Impact commissioners continue to harm citizens of Ottawa County." End of quote. Jackson cited Ottawa Impact's efforts to oust Administrative Health Officer Adeline Hambley, the board's budget that decreased funding to the health department, and burning taxpayer money on expensive legal counsel as reasons for the recall vote. So there you go. Another recall vote happened close to where I grew up. This one did not go very well. This is an issue that we've talked about on this show. We talked about Grant Public Schools and the mural that was painted for the Family Health Center. And the mural had LGBTQ symbols, supposedly had satanic symbols on it. The satanic symbols, yeah. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Oh, my God. This is why I hate living in the area that I grew up in, is because you got all these backwater, simple-minded farmers that don't know a thing about politics or reality, for that matter. They don't know. They just don't know. This is an area that still doesn't have internet access, for Christ's sakes. Landline phone service is still by copper cable. I mean, goodness gracious. This is an area that has not emerged out of the 20th century, possibly out of the 19th century. So here's the story. This is also by Wood Television. 2 Grant School Board members, Rachel Gort and Richard Vance, also faced recall, but voters chose to keep them in. Petitions were filed in August against them and 2 others, citing their June 19th vote to issue a letter to terminate the school district's partnership with Family Health Care after a student-designed mural at the health center, which is located inside the middle school, included LGBTQ plus symbols, which sparked concerns from some. In September, the school board approved a new 3-year contract with Family Health Care. The deal included removing the mural. And then, oh my goodness, we just talked about a week or 2 ago on the show about how the Satanic Temple were able to give the invocation before the Ottawa County board meeting. Well, apparently the Satanic Temple had an enemy in Ottawa County. I have this story by John Hogan writing for Wood TV. This is dated May 8th out of Grand Rapids. An Ottawa County man accused of building bombs because he wanted to blow up a satanic temple in Massachusetts has been indicted on charges that has him facing a decade in prison. A federal indictment accuses Luke Isaac Terpstra of building several devices he characterized as bombs and then traveling from his home in Grant, Michigan, to Salem, Massachusetts. With him, he carried an improvised explosive device, multiple firearms, and ammunition, according to the indictment filed in Grand Rapids this week. A federal court hearing has been set for May 13th in Grand Rapids. Officials say the 30-year-old assembled a container that had coins taped to the outside and a container that had rifle ammunition secured to the sides. He made the drive from Michigan to Massachusetts in September 2023, court records show. Terpstra later said he possessed the bombs because he wanted to blow up the Satanic Temple, records show. Salem police said they were told by Michigan law enforcement that Terpstra's intention was to target the Satanic Temple. In a statement posted to its website, the city said, quote, "The city of Salem and the Salem Police Department recognize that it is frightening and concerning that there are individuals who would threaten or carry out violent attacks against others based on their beliefs and that we are a target. On the one hand, it is gratifying that our federal and local partners were able to thwart Terpstra. On the other, it's terrifying that he walked in our midst planning such violence." End of quote. In a news release, U.S. Attorney Mark Totten said the charges, quote, "demonstrate my office's continued commitment to protecting our citizens from dangerous threats. Building explosive devices and transporting them with the intent to injure civilians and damage property puts us all at risk, and those who commit such crimes will be held accountable." End of quote. So there you go, another idiot from Grant. They've been smelling too much cow manure. It's affected their brain, or they've been picking onions for too long in the field. But that's what Grant's famous for, is onions. And I want to get to one final story. This popped up on my feed yesterday. This is scary. As I use news stories from the Associated Press, this should scare the hell out of everybody. This is Callie Hayes writing for Business Insider. This is dated May 7th. Listen to this, folks. Before Meta stepped away from nearly all of its dealings with the news industry, Mark Zuckerberg considered getting more entangled with it than ever. Between 2017 and 2018, the founder and CEO of Facebook, as it was then still known, seriously considered acquiring a news outlet. His focus eventually turned to the Associated Press, the storied news agency service, according to 3 people familiar with internal Facebook talks surrounding the idea. The people spoke with Business Insider on the condition of anonymity, although their identities are known to Business Insider. Since the Associated Press is a news cooperative, an outright acquisition would have been essentially impossible, but Facebook discussed measures like permanently subsidizing the agency. People familiar with the issue said the initial idea was for Facebook to be the entity behind the AP. They also said Zuckerberg considered backing the outlet as an individual, like Jeff Bezos does with the Washington Post, or through his philanthropic organization, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. At the time, Facebook was still reeling from the politicization and manipulation of the platform during the 2016 U.S. presidential election. After initially dismissing Facebook's role in politics and its influence on voters, Zuckerberg shifted his tone. In a 2017 memo, he laid out how Facebook was dedicated to becoming more responsible with how it approached news content on the platform. Zuckerberg wrote, quote, "Giving people a voice is not enough without having people dedicated to uncovering new information and analyzing it. There is more we must do to support the news industry to make sure this vital social function is sustainable," end of quote. Internal talks about Facebook permanently subsidizing the AP, which Facebook thought about using to provide a constant stream of high-quality news across its platforms, were serious, according to 2 of the people familiar with the matter. The company's mergers and acquisitions team became involved to figure out how it could happen, but the idea was ultimately abandoned because the company feared such a move could attract unwanted regulatory scrutiny, according to one of the people familiar with it. Yeah, that should be scary as hell, folks. Let me continue. A spokesperson for the Associated Press told Business Insider, quote, "If there were talks, they didn't involve AP," end of quote. The spokesperson also said that as a cooperative, the agency, quote, "cannot be bought or sold," end of quote. Around this time, Zuckerberg also weighed an option to Facebook to start a news organization, according to the 3 people familiar with the matter. The company considered hiring top journalism talent by luring experienced professionals with big paychecks to produce original news content. This idea was also abandoned mostly due to concerns about public blowback and trust in Facebook at the time. A spokesperson for Meta declined comment. So, yeah, that should really scare the hell out of everybody that just heard this story. Facebook wanting to purchase the Associated Press, the only wire service that matters in this country. Everybody uses the Associated Press. Newspapers, radio news, television news, this show, of course. We use the AP because they are widely trusted to provide straight news, not opinion, straight news. So this is scary that Zuckerberg tried to do this, and I really hope that nobody else gets a similar idea. Because when the news becomes totally bought, I mean, it already is. Look at the companies that own the networks. If Associated Press got bought and paid for by one person, just think about how much is being filtered that's never going to get out. That should scare everybody listening to my voice right now. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to
The
choose.
stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.